Well, hello everyone, how are you doing this fine day? Hope you're enjoying your week. Welcome to another survival challenge. And would you look at that, it's not a Helldivers video. You guys were so scared that we were just gonna be stuck in this infinite hellscape of permanent helldiverness. But we're out, we're free, we're moving on to other things. You can relax, sort of. Not really forever. Because at the end of the day, I'm still a filthy capitalist, and if these videos don't do as well as the Helldivers videos, guess who's going right back to the Helldivers videos? You guys need to support the shit that you want to see. If you're telling me you don't want the Helldivers videos, but y'all are watching the Helldivers videos more than the other videos, you're giving me a bunch of mixed messages. It's kind of like when everybody kept saying that they hated the Star Wars sequels, but yet each of the Star Wars sequels made over $1 billion. I don't even blame Disney for keep on making those films so goddamn trashy. Y'all were throwing fucking money at them the whole time. Why would they listen to any complaints if you got them swimming in cash? But for now, we are moving on, and today's video is going to be about Devil May Cry 3. More specifically, that big-ass tower that Virgil summons in Devil May Cry 3. We're going to remove Dante from the story and replace him with a bunch of other characters I think would be just as interesting, and watch them rise up through that tower, see how far they can get before they get murder raped by a bunch of demons. But I've wasted enough of your time. Let's get started. So for people who haven't played Devil May Cry 3, just a sort of basic summary of what they can expect here. Dante and Virgil are brothers. Virgil shows up and creates this massive tower that just pops out in the middle of the city with the intentions of getting to the top of the tower and opening up a portal into the underworld so that he can acquire more demonic power. He then challenges Dante to get to the top of the tower so that he could stop him from opening this portal. Then when Dante gets to the top of the tower, there's like this whole twist where Virgil actually needed Dante to be there so that he can open the portal in the first place and acquire said demonic power. So for this challenge, we actually have to change the story a little bit, since none of these characters are going to be needed to get to the top of the tower in order to open the portal. You need Dante and his pendant. So for the purpose of this challenge, we're just going to have them get up to the top, and when they do, the portal will just open for them and they can go in and do all the stuff that they have to do. And as they make it up through this tower, they're going to have to go through all the same shit that Dante had to go through. They got to fight the Jester, they got to fight Arkham, they're going to have to fight that big-ass Ice Cerberus and that chick with the lightning powers that you get the little cool lightning bat guitar from. And they're gonna have to get through there not one, not two, but 3 separate fights with Virgil in order to stop him from opening up this portal and bringing upon hell on earth. So how strong are the devils that our survivors are gonna have to come up against when going through this tower? And here's the part where a wise man would tread carefully, because the beloved scaling community that are very close friends of the channel absolutely adore to fondle and play with the shiny demon-powered infused testicles of Dante and Virgil to a ridiculous extent. I mean, they think this dude is so fucking strong, it's insane. Even as far back as DMC3, which is a prequel to the whole series and where he's at his absolute weakest, they still have this motherfucker at City. City? How? What does he do that even comes close to City? At one point in the game, he comes across this big-ass concrete door that he's incapable of getting through. With all his crazy, demonic, multiversal levels of power that people claim he has, he can't get through this fucking door. And you can't even say that it's like game mechanics, because it's an important cutscene where you meet an important character known as Jester. They have a whole conversation about how he can't break through the door. Where are you guys getting City? I mean, later in the game, he definitely gets stronger. He even unlocks a devil trigger, but we don't know how much stronger that devil trigger makes him. We know it makes him do a little more damage. We know it makes him faster. That's it. Where are you guys going from he can't break through a concrete door to he can destroy fucking cities? How are y'all making this leap? I don't understand. I mean, shit, towards the end of the game, after they already unlocked their devil triggers and have basically all of their weapons, Virgil fights against Lady, tries to slice her, hits her little bazooka thing, just a metal bazooka. It's not an enchanted bazooka. It's not a magical bazooka. It's just a bazooka. He hits it with his sword, and she blocks his fucking sword. He doesn't cut through it. Virgil's sword, called Yamato, has the ability to cut through space. So a lot of people say, well, it just negates durability completely unless it goes up against another demonic weapon. And that not being able to cut through this bazooka is actually an inconsistency in the lore of the story. I don't actually agree, because if you read the novels and you get into sort of the outside stuff other than the game, you find out that yes, he can cut through space, but only when he has demonic power. And this was right after his fight with Dante, so it makes sense that he was out of his demonic power and could not actually use his space cutting abilities. I agree with all that. Having said that, even without his demonic power and his crazy space cutting ability, if this motherfucker was City, he would still cut through the bazooka. And this is one of many reasons why scalers annoy so many people. Not only do we not understand where you're getting this shit from, but you adamantly ignore shit that happens in the story in order to push whatever weird thing you want to push any given Sunday. The devils in the tower have a lot of really cool powers. They have regenerating abilities, they're super fast. Some of them have fire powers and lightning powers and ice powers. Some of them have teleportation. They can go into like other dimensions and drag you in and make you fight in a sort of otherworldly dimension. There's a lot of cool stuff they have. But city destroyers, they are not. Any survivor on this list is going to be strong enough to be able to physically damage the things that they're fighting against, while the devils that they're fighting against will be able to damage them, but not completely eviscerate them like I think a lot of people in the comment sections are probably going to argue. It's going to be a good fight. So, you know, just sit down, relax, and enjoy. First up, we have Kratos from the Norse God of War games. And you know what? I really need to think long and hard about changing up how I do these videos. Because how I structure these videos is that the person who goes on the list first is the person who will do the worst at the challenge. And then as I go on, people will do better and better. And the person at the back of the list is who will do the best. But I feel like that means I'm going to lose a lot of people at the very start of the video if I have someone there who people just think is the absolute shit. But, yeah, Kratos is not the shit in these games, guys. He's not as strong as people say. He's not as fast as people say. He doesn't have any of the powers that he had in the original games that would have made him very difficult to deal with in this challenge. He only really has like 2 or 3 fucking powers. And overall, he just doesn't have what he needs to get through this tower. But don't freak out. I'm going to go down the list and talk about the different things that people say about him that is completely bullshit. I'm going to support my points. Relax. Don't have an aneurysm. So the first thing we need to combat is his physical strength. People say this character basically has limitless strength. It's multiversal levels, it's infinite, it's unmeasurable, whatever. Whatever bullshit thing that they like to say. Now, if we were talking about the original Kratos from the Greek games, to a large extent, I would agree with you. However, in these games, in the Norse games, he doesn't show anything close to that. Like, what do people say about him, right? He flipped the temple, and by flipping the temple, he actually flipped the 9 realms because the 9 realms are housed inside the temple. That's something that people say. That is one of the super bullshit things that people say. Let me ask you something. When he flips the temple, he's on the outside of the temple, right? And while he's on the outside of the temple, he's in Midgard, right? So how is Midgard inside the temple if he's outside the temple currently standing in Midgard? If he goes in the temple and he teleports to Helheim and he leaves the temple, is he no longer in Helheim? He is, right? But he's not in the temple. So obviously Helheim isn't in the temple either. And this is the case with literally every single one of the 9 realms. The temple exists within the realms. The realms are not inside the temple. The temple is essentially a teleportation device that can take you to all of the different 9 realms. But you have to leave the temple to actually explore them. They're not housed inside the temple. I don't get this argument at all. When he flips a temple, it's impressive. It's likely several 100,000 tons. But it's not 9 universes. Like, where are you guys even getting this? Oh, but you don't understand. Thor, during his fight with Jormungandr, was able to splinter the Yggdrasil. And the Yggdrasil houses all the timelines that exist within the 9 realms. So it's like this multiversal feat where he affected all of the multiverse. What? Yes, he was able to splinter the Yggdrasil, and yes, that knocked Jormungandr through time. Okay, how durable was Yggdrasil? You're saying that he broke time. First off, he didn't break time. Time was fine. He affected it. He sent Jormungandr flying through it, sure, but he didn't break time. And even if he did break time, what's the durability of time? It doesn't have one. So if you're gonna argue that it's multiversal or whatever, you're just making shit up. How do we know that Yggdrasil isn't just the durability of like steel or iron or a normal fucking tree? What exists in any of these games that says how durable the Yggdrasil is, where you're coming up with a physical power of multiversal? The only correct answer to how durable is time and how much force is required to break time in any given story is super obvious. It's whatever the writer wants the durability of time to be. It's gonna be different for every single story. And in the God of War games, they never give a legit durability. And to be honest with you, the strength levels of all of the characters across the board throughout those 2 games is so wildly inconsistent, it really doesn't matter. Like, you'll have scenes where Kratos can do insane shit, like flipping the temple or moving that bridge in a circle. He just pushes the whole bridge. But then you'll have other scenes that happen just a few hours later where a basic ass ogre is able to pin Kratos down to the ground, and he just, with all his might, can't get this ogre off of him. And people will say, well, it's not inconsistent because it's written in the story because his rage levels actually increase his strength. Okay, was he like furious when he just pushed the bridge, when he was casually talking while he was doing it? Was he furious when he flipped the temple? No. So is it that his strength is tied to his anger? Or is it that the writers just give and take away powers whenever they want to fabricate bullshit tension in a story where nothing makes sense because they're shitty writers? Kratos is as strong or as weak as he needs to be in any particular scene. It is constantly changing, constantly shifting, and even if you take the absolute strongest feats ever, they don't come anywhere near what people say they are. And this goes with basically every stat that exists. In God of War 2018, Mimir directly states that Thor and Kratos will not be able to break through some fucking ice. It's just regular ice. How are people going to argue that Thor's attacks are destroying multiverses when you can't break through, like, what, 40, 50 feet of ice? Is that just another thing that you want to completely ignore to push your bullshit points? I mean, shit, most of Kratos' fights, he can't even win by himself. Like, what, he has 4 hard fights that where he doesn't outnumber the opponent? He's got the Heimdall fight, the Bridge Guardian fight, Magni and Modi was 2v2. There might be 1 or 2 others, but the vast majority of his tougher fights, he's fighting with the help of the boy or Freya. If it's a boss fight, it's almost always a 2v1 fight where they're gang raping the person they're fucking fighting against. He's just not that impressive of a character in these games. This is one of many problems that exists within the writing of this story that is then exacerbated by scalers who just like to pump up the numbers with a bunch of bullshit. Like, for instance, another way they like to pump up the numbers is when they talk about speed. There's a statement in the game that says that the Valkyries travel all across the 9 realms collecting souls and shit and bringing them to Valhalla or Helheim, right? And people say that, well, because they travel across all of the 9 realms, that must mean they have infinite speed since they can, like, break through dimensional barriers and shit. But again, this is something that scalers are just making up because you know who else travels through all the 9 realms? Kratos. And he doesn't run at infinite speed the entire time he does it. You, throughout the course of the game, play the game going to every single universe. There are portals that just pop up that you can travel through. So the Valkyries being able to travel all across the 9 realms, why are you assuming that they're doing it in any way differently than when Kratos does it, which is just going through portals? Why are you thinking that Kratos doesn't need infinite speed to do it, but the Valkyries do? It doesn't make sense. You're not thinking in any way that's logical, and you're literally just making shit up. Really, the only and best argument you can give for making Norse Kratos super powerful is to scale him to Greek Kratos, where he has a lot of really impressive feats. The problem is you can't do that because the Norse games are a reboot of the franchise. It completely changes the story and the context of a lot of things that happen in the Greek games. These are not the same characters, and this is not an evolution of the same story. It's all completely different, and I would argue it's far too different to even say that they're the same character. And even when they do try to link the stories back to the Greek games and make it seem like it's the same story, they just dig themselves in a bigger hole because their explanations don't make any goddamn sense. Like, the reason why Kratos doesn't have any of his old powers or magic from the previous games is because, as Freya put it, when the old world was destroyed, the magic died with it. That's what Freya says. That is the only explanation that we get for why Kratos can't use the magic from his previous world. It's because it died. Despite the fact that at the end of God of War 3, no, it didn't. He released all the hope out of his body and gave it to the people of Greece. How would he be able to do that if they were all dead and the world was completely destroyed? It was devastated, but it didn't cease to exist. How could you say that Kratos lost all his magic because that world was destroyed, yet he has the Blades of Chaos on his back that still have the magic? Not only does this explanation not make any sense, but the evidence that it's wrong is literally sitting there on Kratos' back. And none of the characters point this out, and the reason why none of the characters point this out is because the writers in the story didn't realize this. It is a badly written story. People keep asking me to make a whole video just talking about all the things I don't like about this game. It would be an hour-long video. There's so many problems. And these are problems that have absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I like the Greek games. These games can't stand on their own, even if I've never played the Greek games. The stories are poorly written. Now, having said all that, how would Kratos do if he entered the tower in DMC3? He would do very poorly, and it's really just for one main reason. He's way too slow. Physical strength-wise, he's far superior than any of the devils that he's going to come into contact with, but his speed is severely lacking. In Devil May Cry 3, we see Virgil and Dante moving fast enough to deflect bullets and cutting all of the raindrops that are falling while fighting each other in a split second. I forgot exactly how fast people were saying this is. It's not light speed. It's like crazy, super hypersonic, some shit. It's stupidly fast. Kratos doesn't have anything like this in all of the Norse games. He doesn't. If you go back to the original Greek games, he does. There's actually a scene in the original games where he travels across a room that has falling debris that's gonna, crush him, and he makes it all the way across the room so fast that the debris doesn't even look like it's moving. He is stupidly fast. There's nothing like that in the Norse games. In fact, a large number of enemies are shown to be considerably faster than Kratos. Baldur blitzes the shit out of Kratos constantly. The Valkyries are shown to be way faster than Kratos, and none of them really have a speed or any feats that shows that they are so fast they can deflect bullets. There isn't a single character in all of the Norse God of War games that shots from a bow and arrow aren't fast enough to deal with. And you can say, well, no, that's not fair. That's gameplay. I mean, is it though? Atreus' main weapon is a bow and arrow. Like, he's not physically capable of using any other weapon. And his bow works against everybody. There's no evidence that his bow shoots arrows faster than any normal person. Atreus isn't even shown to have any form of super strength to where he could fire a bow faster than a normal person. He has different types of arrows that are enchanted and do different types of damage, but he doesn't have faster arrows. There's no evidence of that. It's not like in the original God of War games where right at the beginning of the game, in a cutscene, we see that Kratos very casually dodges an arrow that he's not even really paying attention to. And then when you play the actual level, arrows are a massive threat to you, and you're not capable of dodging them. You have to hide behind shit, but we already saw in the cutscene that he can dodge them. So the cutscene and the gameplay are different. They conflict with one another. So you can go with the cutscene since it conflicts with the gameplay, so that gameplay isn't necessarily his canon power. What happened in the cutscene was. But in the Norse God of War games, arrows are shown to be a threat to everyone, whether you're talking about cutscenes or gameplay. No one's faster than an arrow, or at least not so much faster than an arrow that it ceases to become a threat to them. They're just not all that fast. At least not when compared to DMC. And a lot of the reason for this is what I like to call the Mortal Kombat effect, where they take a series that's super unrealistic and they try to ground it. So they have real actors playing the roles, and they don't allow those characters to do anything that an actual real physical body can do. It's the reason why you play something like Tekken and you have all this crazy shit happening where they're smashing through buildings and shooting lasers and fighting through the air. And then you play Mortal Kombat and all the cutscenes are just super unimpressive, slow punching, and just very dull because they can only do what humans can do. They did the same thing with the God of War games. In the Greek God of War games, Kratos can literally do whatever they want him to do because that's not a real person's body. They just programmed his whole body to do that. In the Norse games, he's a real person, so he's limited. And it makes the fights and overall what you can do in the game less visually interesting, but also has a side effect of making him a far weaker character. So yeah, overall, Kratos will do pretty well until he gets to someone who completely fucking blitzes him. So he's gonna end up losing at the very first Virgil fight. There's really nothing he can do. His ice and fire attacks aren't gonna mean a whole lot. His regen is nice, but it's nowhere near Virgil's regen, and there's no evidence that he would survive something like what Virgil did with Dante when he sliced him in half. Kratos' regen is not that good, so yeah, Kratos fucking loses here. Next up, we have Ryu Hayabusa from the Ninja Gaiden series. You know, when I came up with the idea for this video, it wasn't supposed to be like a shitting on scalers type of video, but it just kind of is working out that way. But yeah, scalers are wrong about Ryu too. They got this motherfucker at Planetary, and the reason why they got him at Planetary is because there's this big-ass dragon that he fights, and the dragon's capable of destroying the planet. And that's true. Ryu's not capable of harming this dragon until he gets the true dragon sword, which then allows him to harm it. But that's because the sword essentially has, like, durability negation abilities. That doesn't mean it's a planet-destroying weapon or that Ryu becomes planet-destroying. He's just capable of harming this being that's normally immune to his attacks. Once he has the sword and he's capable of cutting it, he kills it just like he kills anything else with like regular sword strikes. But Ryu is not a planetary being. I never agree with this idea that scalers have that just because somebody who's considerably weaker overcomes a much stronger being that they automatically scale to that level of power. I've never understood this. I think it's dumb. I don't think it makes any sense. I think that it goes against like storytelling, which is all about unlikely heroes rising up to overcome challenges challenges that are far greater than themselves. And the idea that you could just make that character the same tier as the god level beings that they overcame is kind of ridiculous to me. Ryu is a pretty goddamn low tier character. He's superhumanly fast and strong for sure, but I mean, if you give one of his enemies an AK-47, he's kind of fucked. There's multiple instances throughout these games that it's shown that if his enemy has a gun, there's not a whole lot he can do. He kind of has to use stealth or otherwise work around his enemies having guns. At one point in one of the games, he comes across like a small army of dudes who all have rifles, and the only way he can even go near them is when he causes this massive like foggy mist thing so they can't see him, and then he goes and kills them all in the fog. The game makes it very clear that if he tries to approach those people with guns, they're gonna shoot and kill him very easily. And every time in the game you go up against someone with guns, it's really smart to take that person out immediately, because 1 or 2 shots from their guns, you're dead. In fact, just a couple hits from basically any enemy type in the entire game kills you. Ryu is very much what you would call a glass cannon. He comes in with a really powerful sword that can slice through just about anything and just carves the shit out of people constantly, but he himself is just a mortal man of flesh and blood and can be harmed by all the same shit that he can harm other people with. Honestly, in a straight up fight between Ryu Hayabusa and Kratos, I would probably say Kratos would beat him. The only reason why Ryu is higher up on the list than Kratos is because, well, he's faster and more mobile. And his general fighting style of him constantly outmaneuvering his enemies and his skill of not getting hit by blades ever means that he'll probably last a lot longer than Kratos, someone who really doesn't care if he gets hit nearly that. Like, Kratos gets hit a lot. He gets cut, he gets stabbed, he gets thrown around. Canonically, he gets hit all the fucking time. He just has a healing factor. But that healing factor is shown to have very clear limits, and Kratos is gonna hit that limit pretty damn quick, especially when he comes across people who are significantly faster than he is. Ryu Hayabusa canonically goes through all of his games without ever getting hit at all. If he does get hit, he fucking dies. He doesn't have a regen. Just in terms of general sword skill, he is shown to be more skilled than the Norse version of Kratos. And that's really the only reason why I think he'll last a little bit longer. However, he still hits the same hard stop that Kratos does, and that is when he comes up against Virgil. Because, once again, Virgil's just so much faster than he is. I mean, you're comparing Ryu, a character who goes up against people with guns and is basically an instant death sentence, against someone like Virgil, who casually not only deflects, but literally catches bullets, then lines them up perfectly on the ground and swats them at his opponents. His speed is just so far beyond not only Ryu Hayabusa, but anything that exists within Ryu Hayabusa's universe. I mean, Ryu is one of the fastest characters in his universe. That's his whole thing. That's how he's able to survive for so long, because people struggle to actually hit him. He's gonna be completely out of his element in the Devil May Cry universe when even characters like Virgil's casual speeds are going to be several thousand times faster than anything Ryu's capable of. And that's if these characters weren't capable of regen, which they are. Now, normally I would say that wouldn't matter, because the true dragon sword is actually capable of destroying all evil beings in a single strike. So he should be able to kill the vast majority of the devils within that tower in one hit. But I don't necessarily think that Virgil would count as evil enough for that to qualify for him. Virgil's a pretty complicated character and could possibly be seen as being evil, but I think he's gray enough that you can argue that not being the case. But honestly, even if I gave it to him and said that Ryu would kill him in one hit with a sword, the chances of that actually happening is still pretty low because, again, Virgil is stupidly fucking fast. And chances are, with Ryu going through the tower and one-shotting every single devil that's there, Virgil will likely study Ryu going through the tower and realize it's about his sword before they ever even fight anyway, because that's basically the exact same thing he did with Dante. If Virgil is aware that Ryu's sword has the ability to one-shot him before their fight even begins, there isn't a chance in hell he's gonna let that sword touch him. So yeah, I would say Ryu does a lot better at the start than Kratos does, but they both hit a hard stop when they get to Virgil. Ryu is just gonna have a much easier time getting to Virgil than Kratos will. Next up, we have Samurai Jack from Stella Got Her Groove Back. I was originally going to put Juliet Starling from Lollipop Chainsaw on here, but then I realized I haven't played that game in forever and don't think I would be able to do it properly without like going back and kind of refreshing myself a little bit. So fuck it, Samurai Jack it is. And that's really fine by me because I think Samurai Jack kind of has everything that he needs to make it make sense that he would go through this tower and do relatively well doing it. Not only is he an insanely skilled swordsman and has the stats to be able to take out basically anything here, but he also has a sword that is specifically designed to kill evil beings and even completely removes things like regen or incorporeality, whatever the ghost shit where you can go through walls and stuff, completely from anyone he's fighting against. This means he's not gonna have any trouble killing anything when he hits them with a sword. But he's also physically strong enough to fight against everybody. He's faster than basically everybody here. including characters like Virgil. And he has the stamina to fight his way all the way up through the tower without really having to stop or take breaks or get exhausted and get beat by some dude he comes into contact with, which is something I didn't bring up earlier. But that's something that Kratos will actually have a problem with, because Kratos in the Norse games actually gets tired really fast. In many of the boss fights that he deals with throughout those 2 games, he is shown getting physically exhausted by the end of the fight and breathing hard and walking slow and holding his side. And yeah, he struggles in that area. By comparison, characters like Ryu Hayabusa and Samurai Jack just really don't have that. Samurai Jack is shown being tired sometimes, but usually only after like a full day of fighting straight, and usually against hundreds and hundreds of people that really push him to his absolute limit. So not only is he going to get his way through the tower, he's going to get through it very, very quickly. So the question becomes, just like Ryu Hayabusa and Kratos, how is he going to do when he comes face to face with Virgil? And like I said, he's going to do really well. Really, the only thing that he's going to struggle with is the fact that he doesn't have a healing factor. But in terms of his speed, strength, sword skills, all of that shit should be comparable, if not far superior to Virgil with things like his speed. Like, there are multiple times in the Samurai Jack story where Samurai Jack watches light coming at him and can see it, and then reacts to it, moves out the way, and just watches it pass. Like, he sees light in slow motion. As fast as Virgil is, he isn't that fast. And much like Ryu Hayabusa's sword that one-shots all evil beings, Samurai Jack's sword affects evil beings in a very negative way, but like I said, it takes away their ability to regen. And unlike Ryu Hayabusa's sword, where it's a lot more effective in this regard, it doesn't just take away their regen, it actually kills them in a single hit. Taking away their regen will make it way less obvious to Virgil exactly what Samurai Jack's sword is doing, because all of the normal demons don't have regen. So he's not going to be able to tell immediately, even if he does study Samurai Jack, that his sword is removing regen, because Virgil's going to be the first person he runs into that even has regen. When you go over to Ryu Hayabusa, this is far more obvious if studied by Virgil, because he can do a small slice on someone's leg and they would instantly fall down dead, because that's the power the sword has. Samurai Jack doesn't have anything like this. So when he comes face to face with Virgil and they have their fight, that's where Virgil's going to realize that his regen isn't going to work. And it's going to be a bit of a surprise during that fight. Virgil's going to have no choice but to flee that first fight and come up with some sort of plan to overcome Samurai Jack in their second, and if he survives that one, their eventual third fight. It's almost going to be kind of the reverse of what Devil May Cry 3 was, where Virgil was really powerful and was trying to find a way to acquire more power by going to hell, and Dante was the one getting slowly and slowly stronger until he caught up to where Virgil was. When Samurai Jack arrives at the tower, Virgil's the one that's going to have to catch up to Samurai Jack's level of power. And he's going to have to figure out some sort of way to improve himself before he fights Samurai Jack that second and third time. Will he actually be able to do that? I don't know, because I don't know if there's any real way for Virgil to improve his power without going on and taking out all of the demon bosses like Dante did, because Dante was able to get weapons from all of them and increase his power that way. Virgil doesn't do that because he doesn't have to do that. He only actually steals the weapon of one boss. Would Virgil make the decision to go around and steal the weapons of all of the bosses to empower himself enough to be able to take on Samurai Jack in a 1v1 fight? Maybe, but that'll also make Samurai Jack's fight through the tower a whole lot easier, since he won't have to deal with all the bosses. Overall, I don't really think it's going to matter, because I think that Samurai Jack's speed is just far beyond what Virgil's capable of, and I don't think any amount of power-ups that he can do in that tower are going to increase his speed enough to make much of a difference. So yeah, I think the best Virgil can do is closing the gap between them, not necessarily overcome them. At the end of the day, Samurai Jack is probably one of the most skilled swordsmen in all of fiction. And at this early on in the series, again, Devil May Cry 3 is a prequel to the series. Virgil just doesn't really have anything that can go up against someone like Jack. So yeah, Jack should win. He should get all the way through. He'll likely kill Arkham, and he'll likely stop the portal to the demon world from even opening up. Last up, but certainly not least, we have Eve from Stellar Blade. I've talked about this character quite a few times, and obviously, I mean, look how good of a character she is. With all that quality plot. Look at that plot. Look how much plot there is. It is the kind of plot you just want to bury your face into. In these past times I've talked about this character, I've talked about her rather highly when it comes to her physical ability. For the people who didn't see those videos and haven't actually heard me talk about this character, I'll shortly reiterate exactly what kind of character she is. So Eve is an android that's a part of the Eve Defense Force, and it's essentially an army of android chicks that look exactly like she does. Easily, pound for pound, the most bangable defense force in fiction. No doubt about that. And she's sent down to planet Earth to fight against the Natiba, which is this species of fucked up beings that can evolve and adapt to their surroundings, and they're super powerful and shit. And while she's pretty damn powerful at the start, the thing that makes her really powerful is the fact that she can absorb the cores and memory sticks of other Eve units, acquiring all of their experiences and strength, fighting techniques and skills, and basically everything about that Eve just gets added on to her. By the end of the game, she's done this to over like 100 Eve cores, and she becomes like the most powerful Eve that's ever lived. And I've discussed this at length in the past. One thing that I haven't discussed in the past, because it hasn't really been relevant, is her sword, the Blood Edge, which is also a pretty major factor in just how powerful she becomes. But basically, the Blood Edge has the ability that when she cuts someone, it derives energy from the blood that gets on the blade and feeds it into Eve, making her vastly more powerful. This is so effective that by the end of the game, when she fights against the Elder Natiba, who is the most powerful Natiba, using her sword against him actually makes her the new Elder Natiba. She literally goes from being an android to being a flesh and blood creature that is a Natiba. And this is what I think is going to make her do the best in Devil May Cry 3. Now, the best argument that I can think of against this is that the sword in the game only works on Natibas, so where is the evidence that it would be able to work on something like demons to enhance her powers? But I have two arguments against this. First being, it doesn't just work on Natibas, it also works on androids that you can fight, who don't even have blood, and yet you can still absorb energy from them. But there could still be reasons for this, like if those androids are getting energy from the Natibas, and then you're hitting the androids, it could still all be parts of the same sort of DNA and the same sort of energy that you're getting from these two creatures. Fair enough. I may agree with this if it wasn't for the fact that in the lore of the game, they actually reveal some very interesting information. They talk about how this technology that can absorb energies actually struggled to absorb energies from Natiba for a long time, and when it did, the energy that it acquired from them was very unstable. And the reason why this is because the Natiba's DNA are constantly shifting and changing. Every Natiba that you fight has completely different DNA and genetics because they all evolve and adapt to different situations around themselves. No two Natiba are the same. So while they are one species, genetically, they're technically each their own individual species where none of them match the other in any sort of genetic way. They have different energy types, different type of blood, different biology, every single Natiba you come across. Eve's sword, the Blood Edge, is capable of acquiring energy from any Natiba regardless of what kind. So I think the argument that it wouldn't work on the demons because they're a different species is kind of a weak argument if it works on literally any kind of Natiba regardless of how their DNA shifts in what direction. It seems to me that the Blood Edge can work on literally any species that you use it on and convert whatever energy they have in their body to whatever energy that Eve needs in order to use. And considering that Eve was able to use it on the Elder Natiba and literally become a Natiba tells me one thing. If she uses the Blood Edge in Devil May Cry 3 going up the tower, she'll end up stealing demonic energy and possibly even becoming a demon herself if she kills enough. Even if Eve wasn't massively more powerful than everybody within this tower at the start of the challenge, which depending on what version of Eve I use to put in the challenge, she absolutely could be, it's inevitable that eventually while fighting her way up through this tower, she will surpass literally everyone. By the time she gets to Virgil, like a third of the way through the game, in order to fight against him, she would have absorbed the demonic energy of literally hundreds of demons on her way there, each one making her more and more powerful. By the time she gets to the end of the game, you're talking about tens of thousands of demons, including Virgil himself, that will all add power to her and completely change how her biology works. Like for instance, Eve does not have a regen. She has to heal normally. If she slices Virgil enough times, she will eventually gain the ability to regen just like he does. Every single time Virgil shows up to fight her, he'll be fighting someone vastly more powerful with far more different abilities than he could possibly hope to keep up with. And that's completely removing from the table the fact that her base stats are significantly higher than his. Before Eve becomes an Elder Natiba, she's capable of reacting to and fighting against beings who are light speed. We know they're exactly light speed because they literally use all light-based attacks. Everything they do is light speed, and she's capable of dodging them, deflecting them, matching them in sword blows. It is literally not possible for her to be slower than light speed and accomplish the things that she accomplishes in this game. At one point in the game, she fights against an Alpha Natiba who's the size of this giant satellite. This satellite is so big that when it's on Earth, you can't see the top of it because it disappears above the clouds. She one-shots this thing with a cannon, and she gets the energy for the cannon from herself. It's not a buff or anything. She just uses the power of her core, puts it into her cannon, and fires it and completely one-shots this Alpha Natiba that's like the size of a fucking small city. Now, doing this is shown to take a lot out of her and really tires her out and everything, but she's back on her feet in a couple of minutes and shown to be completely fine and right back to fighting. So the power that she used wasn't permanent. It just recharged back to full in a little bit. And this isn't even the end of the game. This is like maybe, I don't know, 70% of the way through the game. She gets even more powerful after this as she absorbs more cores and kills more Natibas. And by the end of the game, after she actually becomes the Alpha Natiba, she's so powerful that she's capable of taking on the entire Eve defense force by herself. Literally an army of Eves who are all just as strong as she was when she started the game at the beginning, and she beats them all. They're not even capable of touching her. This is particularly impressive since even Eve at the very beginning of the game is able to react to light speed attacks. I'm not gonna go as far as to say early Eve is light speed, but she is capable of reacting to them. She can dodge them and deflect them. If Eve, at the point that she's an Alpha Natiba, is capable of fighting against literally an army of other Eves that can all react and deflect light speed attacks, you would have to assume that this version of Eve would have to be quite a bit faster than that, like faster than light speed, which would completely put the strongest thing that Virgil has, his speed, to shame, at least as far as DMC3 is concerned. So yeah, I don't think there's any question here. I think Eve is slaughtering her way through this entire tower. She's absolutely brutalizing Virgil, and by the time she gets to the end, she's going to be vastly more powerful than she ever was in her own game, even more powerful than she was when she became the Alpha Natiba. She'll be like an android Alpha Natiba demon. And I mean, come on, that's badass. And then, you know, maybe after that she'll go and like have a mud wrestling match with Juliet Starling or something. She's 18. I'm not being weird. But that's gonna be all from me. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. Remember, if you join the membership, you get videos early. And always remember, y'all stay safe out there, you hear?